Hi guys, it's Alice from the Advice Service here. I'm here with Corey, one of our academic staff, and we're going to be talking about academic judgment, a little bit about the process of marking and what happens when students submit their work. Corey, when a student hits that submit button after they've toiled over their work for hours and they hit submit, what happens to their work from there?
So the first thing that the student will get is a lovely pop-up that says you have successfully submitted your work. That will be accompanied by an email, which we call the Turnitin receipt. It's your guarantee that your work went in. So if anything were to happen, then the student has got evidence that, yes, I submitted my work, it was Moodle or Turnitin that hasn't now got it. As soon as that work goes in, it is compared to every paper in our repository and any other repository that is part of Turnitin. And it's compared to websites, it's compared to news articles, journal articles.
Oh, cool.
So that's where this similarity score comes from.
Oh, cool.
And it sits in there ready for a lecturer to mark, or if students want to review their Turnitin similarity report, they can also look at that as well.
So when they get that Turnitin report, would you recommend students screenshot that or anything like that? Or is it on their student system anyway?
So because it's there for them to view, I recommend them going in and having a look, just to check your similarities, just before a lecturer sees it and make comments saying, this is quite a high similarity, because the reports are usually pretty instantaneous. At least we can program it that you can have 3 different attempts to submit and get an instantaneous report. After that, it takes 24 hours for it to come through. But I do recommend go in and have a look at it. Just in case there may be some issues with paraphrasing. It may be the fact that while a student's been working from a source, they may have inadvertently written it almost verbatim, and it does happen. So we do understand that.
Do lecturers mark their own students' work? And if they do, what is the process for that? Make sure everyone's work is marked fairly and equally and things like that. So do teachers mark the work of the student that's in front of them?
Typically, yes. Typically, we mark our own students' work. There are processes in place to keep it fair. Firstly, we can blind mark. So when we set up the Turnitin links on Moodle, we can make it so that we don't see the name of the student who submitted it. Of course, that only works if the student doesn't then put their name on the work.
Right, yeah.
Which has happened to me in the past in other job roles where we've said no names on anything. We want to keep it fair and anonymous. And it has happened. So we can keep it anonymous. But on top of all of that, even if it's not blind marked, for example, presentations, we know who's in front of us and we know those slides then. So what we have in place are called moderation or second marking processes, where another lecturer will come in after the fact and fill in another form to make sure that we are marking fairly, we're marking consistently across the whole of the class as well. So we do make sure that we are quite robust in our marking methods.
Yeah, and that secondary moderator marker, is that from another discipline in the university? Is it from staff from a completely different university? What do they usually use?
It's within our team usually, because that's what we've got on hand. They know the subject as well, and we try to make sure that across every module that we all teach, we're all moderating or second marking one another, so we can ensure that all of us are sticking to best practices throughout everything that we teach.
So when the lecturers go to mark a student's work, is there a framework that the lecturer uses? Like, have you got a reference sheet that you've got alongside you to mark a student's work? How does it usually go? So
we've got the marking rubric, which is attached to the GA36 assessment performer forms.
How did you pull that out of your head?
It's the term that I have to throw around quite a lot. But the GA36 A, B or C or D, depending on your level of study, right at the bottom of it will have a marking rubric, and we sit with that alongside us, as well as the rest of the form, so we can look back and make sure that all the guidance specific to the assessment, we've adhered to it in our marking. But we've also got the different criteria, how many marks are allocated towards it, so we make sure that everything is consistent across every sample. So we do sit with that alongside us, and we give the student a breakdown of marks, to whether we use that through a sliding rubric system or a physical written piece of text. We make sure students know where their marks have come from and where they can improve as well in the future.
How long does it take for a teacher to mark? I guess, how long does it take for them to mark one paper generally, and then a whole class's work? How long does that take?
So, argument's sake, we'll say we're looking at a 2,000 word written piece of work, a class of 20 students. For me, my first few are the hardest to mark, because it's a new assignment, it's a new mindset I've got to get into. So I would say it usually takes about an hour per paper at the start, and it does get a little bit quicker towards the end. But let's say, for argument's sake, you are looking at an hour per student. And then if you've got to go back and check anything, that would be a standard 2,000 word paper. Presentations are sometimes a little bit quicker, but the longer the work, the longer it takes to mark them, which is why the university's got the 20 working day process in place, because we do use it all, particularly for that second marking as well.
So that's a substantial amount of time that teachers dedicate to marking and then getting the marks out to very anxious and eager students.
Absolutely. We understand how much work students put into their work, and we want to give that same respect back of, we are going to be thorough with this, so that not only is it representative of the time that goes into the work being done, but also so that we can make sure that we are following our processes correctly as well.
Do you ever get excited marking students' work? Because I remember I did creative writing course, and my teachers would look forward to marking the creative writing bits because they felt like they were reading stories.
That's
and
really interesting.
things like that, and they just loved their topic. So I wonder how much you look forward to or don't look forward to the marking process.
I quite enjoy it because I like to see where the lectures have translated into practice.
Yeah.
And that's my personal opinion on it. But I don't mind marking. It's not exactly an abhorrent activity that I dread at the end of the semester. Yes, it's time consuming. Yes, it takes a lot of thought process and a lot of real blood, sweat and tears. But it's not a bad process, and it's enjoyable to see all through the year how a student develops as well, because every student has their unique signature of the way they write, and they have their way of structuring things, the way of doing the work, and it's really lovely, especially when you've taught a cohort for a couple of years, how they develop over time as well, which is a real pleasure of the job.
Yeah, you can see them flourish.
Absolutely.
Like academically. So AI is something that I think everyone talks about in every
Absolutely.
realm of life at the moment, from creative jobs to kind of more manual jobs. Do you think AI will be used in future to mark students' work in the same way that it can generate work?
So at the moment, particularly in my department, we don't have any plans to use AI for marking, and we have tried this out. We've taken pieces of our own work that we've done maybe a few years ago. For myself, my undergrad finished about 9 years ago, but I still have all my documents on my cloud drives. So I popped it into Copilot and Gemini, asked it, this is a piece of work, this was the question, please mark it. And the marks were massively overinflated.
Oh, really?
It gave me 85 and 86, when in reality, if I'd marked it myself, I just wouldn't have given myself above a 60.
Yeah, okay.
This was a piece of first year work. I wasn't that confident with referencing and things like that. But AI is very, very complimentary when it puts things out. If you ask it a question, it's very supportive towards you. It wants you to keep coming back. So it's going to do that. But at the minute, we don't have any plans to do that. In the future, long term, I can't say that it won't be used. But I think the AI needs to get a little bit more robust in the way that it marks. For us as staff, we have years of experience marking these pieces of work and adhering to these guidelines. The AI may not even have the rubric in front of it, so it might not be able to interpret that work as well as a human would at this point in time.
Yeah, so the AI lacks that sort of critical element.
Absolutely.
Do you think it also lacks that sort of in-depth knowledge of the subject that you are submitting the work around? Obviously, academics have studied the topic and then they go on to teach that topic, so they've got this wealth of knowledge. I know AI knows a lot, but is there a difference between it knows a lot of kind of surface level versus a small amount of very in-depth knowledge?
You're absolutely right on that one, Alice. It is surface level quite often, and part of my work as an academic misconduct coordinator, I spend a lot of time playing around with AI, getting it to generate different bits and pieces, and quite often it does generate a lot of surface level knowledge that is either not supported with evidence or it's supported by hallucinated evidence that it creates itself. So on the surface, it looks very polished, it looks great. But when you start to break it down, it doesn't quite seem to understand what is being asked for. Your lecturer will ask you for very specific things in assignments and will want you to dive really, really deep into certain topics. AI, unless you specifically ask it to do just that, it's not going to. And that's, I think, the fear of what could happen if it tried to mark work, is that it would see it as the sum of the parts, but it won't actually look at all the parts individually.
So when students finally get their, feedback and their marks, and they're either really excited or a little disappointed, what's your number one sort of recommendation for students to do after they get their marks?
The first place you get your mark is Moodle before you turn it in properly. You can just see that number. The first thing I advise is don't stop there. Don't take the mark on its own in isolation. Open up the submission link, have a read of your feedback. We don't put it there for the benefit of anyone's health. It's for the benefit of the student to learn, what did I do really well?
Yeah.
Where can I improve on? And also, did I actually have it right what I thought I did?
Yeah.
We do sometimes have students that can be very confident about what they've put in, but they've missed the mark of the assignment.
Yeah.
Even just ever so slightly, and it can be very disappointing.
Yeah.
We've all been students before ourselves, we understand it. Everyone's had a bad grade at least once, but the feedback is what's going to help you understand the grade itself. Now, whether that be comments on the work with the little bubbles or the quick marks or written comments, the text box, or like I like to use the voice comment.
Okay.
Because I feel that from a personal standpoint, text can be quite blunt.
Yes. Yeah.
And I know the way that I write emails is very different to how I talk.
Yes.
So when that voice comment, it's only 3 minutes maximum. When that plays, you can hear the tone of voice. You can understand what the lecturer means by certain terminologies. But also, if you don't understand the grade or the feedback, reach out to the module lead. Drop an email. We're always more than happy to explain what things mean.
Yeah. So module leads and lecturers are happy to sort of go in more depth about sort of feedback and comments. So if a student isn't sure what a lecturer means when they say, you know, this doesn't quite look right, or have a look at this again, they can go to their lecturer and
Absolutely.
say, hey, I'm not sure that I understand this. But
Absolutely. Reach out. It's encouraged. Because that's the only way that we are going to learn as human beings, is if we don't understand something, we ask the question.
Yeah.
And sometimes a lecturer might use a term that you don't quite know what that means, or sitting on the borderline between 2 grades.
Yeah.
And it's, what can I do to push 3 or 4 marks up? What is it specifically that you look for? Don't be afraid. Never be afraid to ask the question.
So this is a question that our students ask a lot. Obviously, we get questions from students of all campuses and so many in the union, but why can't students submit an appeal asking for their work to be remarked? Because they put so many hours into their work, they felt really passionate about it, and they feel they should be given a different mark. Why can't they do that?
So that's what academic judgment's all about, is you can't appeal academic judgment. What you can appeal against is if you feel there were mitigating circumstances that prevented you from doing your best. If there's been a factual or a mathematical error around the calculation of the grade, those things can be appealed, but what you can't appeal because you're disappointed. Number of hours put into a piece of work doesn't necessarily translate to a better grade. I could work for 1,000 hours on something and it still not be very good. I'm not a sculptor. If you put a lump of clay in front of me and told me to spend some hours working on it, doesn't matter how long I spend on it, it's still going to be a lump of clay at the end. When we translate that into work, if you don't understand the topic and you're not quite confident about what you're writing, you could spend a very long time on it, but it might not translate to a distinction or first class level grade. So you can't necessarily appeal that. You can speak to your module lead, you can ask them about, where did I go wrong? Why did I get this grade? Can you help me understand it? But you can't necessarily appeal that. You can, obviously, if there's mitigating circumstances, absolutely you can submit that academic appeal. But it's written in university policy, and I believe it's also on the SU website as well for students if they do need that little bit of guidance around why.
Let's say a student submitted their work, but at the time they were dealing with mental health issues, or they were physically unwell, perhaps they lost a family member. We appreciate that sometimes in that moment it's incredibly difficult for a student to say what's going on. So retroactively, students then can put an appeal in for mitigating circumstances, and that would be considered by the university.
They can indeed. Any academic judgment appeal that goes in saying, essentially, I'm disappointed with my mark, I don't think I deserve that mark, that will automatically be rejected. But if a student says, this is what was going on, this is the evidence that I've got to show you that this did happen at the time, that will be considered. But if a student can't get their work in on time because of mitigating circumstances, we do have a policy in place for it to support students to get those mitigating circumstance forms in up to a certain amount of time after the deadline.
Yeah.
So rather than rush and try and throw something together, we are here to support. And between the Students' Union, the Wellbeing Services, student services in general, we've got a lot of avenues of support, and I highly recommend students engage with that rather than sit alone and worry, because we are very proud of the support that we can offer students. And if you necessarily aren't aware of the avenue of support that would be best for you, speak to your module lead, speak to your program manager, they'll be able to tell you a little bit more.
I guess from our perspective as a support network from the union, and probably from the university's perspective as well, we always encourage students to speak up as soon as possible, because I think students really do try and shoulder a lot, and they just get to breaking points. So I think message is just say something to somebody, because there is support there. You don't need to just kind of think, I can do this, and then a little bit more comes and you go, okay, well that's no worries, I can still keep going, and then a little bit more comes because the dam will burst.
It does indeed. Everyone's got a breaking point.
Yeah.
And it's better to just keep in touch with your lecturers, keep in touch with your program manager, and just say, this is going on at the minute. We can point you ourselves to different networks of support.
Yeah.
And if a student comes to yourselves at the union, obviously you guys can do that as well.
Yeah.
But it's about not burying your head in the sand.
Yeah.
Because when you bring your head back out, everything's still there.
I suppose I have some random questions about bringing it back to things like AI and things. I know lots of different departments have different approaches and stuff. What kind of way would you say that students should use AI and should avoid using AI? Because I think a lot of lecturers kind of are like, don't use it at all, but I think it is becoming a tool that everyone uses now. So what would you recommend your students to avoid using it for, or maybe say actually it's quite good for ping-ponging ideas off of it? What would you say?
First and foremost, find out your lecturers, your department's policy on what is the acceptable use for AI in that assignment.
Okay. So
for
it's like a
example,
written policy.
it is indeed.
Okay, great.
And every assignment brief, every GA36 will have that box on there, allowable uses of AI. We have a very general allowable use for things like proofreading and for research as well. For gathering sources, we have an AI tool built into the library. So it wouldn't be very fair of us to say you absolutely cannot use it for research and then develop a tool as well. So we can't do that. But every single assignment will have a box on there that says whether you could use it for advanced proofreading or for structure or for image creation or for coding, for example, or whether there is no allowable AI use outside of the general uses that we permit. And those policies are available to access by students. But again, ask your lecturer what is expected and what is not allowed, because you could be clear that way and you don't end up going down a potential academic misconduct path by using something that you're not supposed to.
And if a student doesn't quite hit that boundary mark to sort of pass their grade, what do retakes and resits, are those available to students? Do students have to request those? What does that generally look like?
So once marking, moderation, sort of first publication of results through Moodle goes out, we sit at exam boards as academic staff. The exam board will suggest whether a student needs to resit or rework a piece of work. Say they got 35 on a written piece of work, it would be considered a rework. So they'll be capped at 40%, but they'll be given an opportunity to take the feedback they've been given and work on it to build that mark back up. If there were extenuating circumstances that were put into an academic appeal, for example, it would be uncapped. So there wouldn't be that 40% cap on it. So typically, yes, resits do happen. And they get allocated then through the exam board processes. The student will be made aware of that through the progression letters on my TSD following the exam board. And then there's a set date, they go in, and the whole process begins again. Marking, moderation, and the feedback comes out.
What's your favourite part of the school year? Is it the sort of the first bit in September where everyone's fresh-faced and sort of very nervous or very eager to learn, and you've got a bunch of kind of people willing to learn in front of you? Or is it the end where everyone's kind of climbed the mountain, you're all looking at the view?
I'm going to be a cheat in this question and say there's 2 points. The first one is the end of November, beginning of December, when our newer students have integrated into their new groups. First submissions have gone in, everyone's abuzz for their first bit of feedback, everyone's enthusiastic, but equally looking forward to Christmas. And then my second then would be that end of the year. We've got dissertations that come in around the sort of beginning of May. Then we have our viva voce examinations in my department on the dissertations themselves. So the student comes in, talks about what they did for their dissertation and all that lovely stuff, and then it leads into graduation. And I adore graduation. Being able to see the product of however many years of hard work that a student has put in, and they walk across that stage, it's absolutely incredible. It is amazing to watch, and we all feel exceptionally proud to be part of that journey. Whether we've taught one module, whether we've taught one every year or a couple every year, every academic staff member is very proud of students when they get to that parapet, shall we say. Absolutely.
You can hold that piece of paper in your hand.
And that's awesome. And students deserve it when they get to that point. And it's a lovely, lovely feeling for us all.
Well, I think we can leave it on that really positive note.
Always
Great.
nice.
Thank you. Well, if you need to reach out to the Students' Union at any point. If you want to discuss anything that we have talked about, then you can reach out to us via our email address. So thank you very much. Thank you, Corey.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having
we
me.
have 3 cameras, and that's why I'm looking
Where do we
around
say
and
goodbye
not
to?
knowing. So goodbye. We hope this has been informative and helpful. And if you need anything further, then please do reach out to us.